It's time to integrate everything we've learnt into our squat pattern. Now, I'm going to take you through some basic squat varieties, some lunge varieties, and some split squat varieties that you can utilize in your training. Now, remembering with all of these can be added to your warm-up to prepare you for movement, or they can be built as your strength session to help prepare you to move better in your squat pattern. So pick the bits that work, pick the challenging exercises that you want to use, but then also keep in mind if you've got overhead issues, i.e. shoulder mobility issues or shoulder stability issues, don't progress to those movements until you've gone through this shoulder workshop as well, because we want to make sure we're covering all our bases before we move to compound lifts and things like that. Now, we're not going to use a barbell for any of these movements because these movements should assist your barbell lifting and be able to give you that extra little 10% in your movement capacity to allow you to move under a bar with more confidence. So taking these movements or exercises and tips and applying them to your training to support your barbell work will go a long way to help you moving pain-free and efficiently through the squat pattern. So let's take a look at the very first version that we can use, which is the goblet squat. Now we can use a dumbbell or a kettlebell on this. We're going to use a kettlebell to start. Now we're simply going to stay over the top of our kettlebell, grabbing the handle and driving up into position like so. Now you can flip the bell and hold on to it upside down. That doesn't really matter. So we're pulling in with our hips here, and we're going to get to our bottom position. Our elbows will come in contact with the inside of our knees, and we're going to drive up to the top position. So maintaining that nice upright posture and returning to the top position. Now the goblet squat is great for maintaining upright stability when you're learning your squat. So before you go overhead, you want to make sure you master the goblet squat and keeping a nice upright position and not letting that weight pull you forward. Now we have our lunge varieties. Depending on what we're doing for our sport, where our issues and niggles lie, you might want to pick the lunge activity or variety that's right for you. And we're simply going to go through a couple of really high impact versions of our lunge and the reasons why we apply them to our training. The first point is a lunge is when you alternate your legs, different to a split squat where we're leaving our legs fixed. Now, lunges are really important for anyone who runs or plays any sport involving running because we need to have that bipedal motion of alternating our stance. Now, we can load that with a kettlebell or we can load it with a dumbbell or a barbell. That's really up to you. So the positions we can have for our lunge are in our rack, in our suitcase position, or even overhead. Okay, so there are basic lunge varieties. We can move into position here or here. Now, if you're holding that kettlebell at the rack, we're challenging that upright stability or trunk stability again. Overhead, making sure our shoulder mobility allows us to get into position. And we can use double bell or single bell. But here's some other variations to your lunge that you can use in your training. First being the airborne lunge, which is a single leg and it uses single leg stability. Great for people that spend half of their time on this leg and half of their time on this leg, e.g. running. So what we're going to do here, we are simply going to reach forward with our hands, touch the floor with our knee, and drive back up to that start position. Now you can do multiple reps on either side, or you can break it down into individual reps. But the idea is to tap the knee on the floor and drive back up to the start position. Really good for single leg stability when we look at progressing to things like a pistol squat or supporting our bipedal sports like running. The next up, we have our Cossack squat. Now that is a lateral lunge version that we can use in a bodyweight or light loading variant that challenges those adductors and those external rotators of the hip, which will allow us to move laterally, and it will also help injury prevention in that sense. If we get used to moving forwards and back all the time, we will have those weakness on those stabilizers. So double shoulder width apart, and we're simply squatting down into position like so. Now, if you can only get to horizontal with the floor, that's okay. We can then move to the other side and work in that depth as we get confident. We can add load. A warning for that, I would only add a light load if we're going to have that in our training, but that's a great prep activity for activating for heavy squats and also split squats. Now, the other example we have is a nice little pendulum lunge. Now, we can do that with our 16 kilo kettlebell, where we're simply stepping back and stepping forward. We can even touch down in the middle like I did just there, or we can sweep through like so. The reason why a pendulum lunge is useful, or why it might apply to you, is because it keeps you moving forwards and backwards. You can add load on a single side or double dumbbell to load it quite heavy, and then you will get a nice little effect of moving, and it also helps shift that weight on that down foot. The final one is our simple step up. We're simply foot up onto a bench or a hard surface, driving up into the start. This is going to help recruiting of the glutes when we're driving up off the floor, and the trick is to squeeze off the floor and not jump. So when we're squeezing, we're coming up to the start and we're controlling that lower. So there's our lunge options. The next up we have split squats. Now there's two types of split squats I want to show you, which is the Bulgarian or the rear foot elevated, and then the front foot elevated split squat. Now our Bulgarian split squat is going to challenge hip extension. So if we have problems with hip extension, don't load the movement too heavy, and make sure you achieve hip extension or good hip extension in your mobility portion and your stability portion of your squat program. So we simply can load this however we need to, down by the side, up into that rack position, and we're going to step away from the bench, bring our foot up and lower into position. We can change the side of which the weight's on or have two weights, and we're aiming for that parallel line once again. You'll feel that through the front of the hip. So be sure to work that hip extension. Now our final type of split squat that I want to show you is our front foot elevated split squat. Now this is going to challenge that front leg quad more so than your hip extension in position here. Now when we step up onto the raised surface, we want to maintain that nice upright position. Knee still hits the floor, driving up. And as we get more and more confident, we can add that weight. So we should be driving through the glute and the quad on that front leg. And this activity will help you progress towards a pistol squat. It will also help you load more dynamically to allow you to decelerate if you're running and doing directional change sports. The final sort of squat tips or exercise you can add to your training that I am a really big fan of is our single kettlebell work. And namely is the bottom up squat, and then we'll go through some little tweaks on a single kettlebell overhead squat to help maintain your overhead position. Now we need a single kettlebell that we can manage, and we're going to get that into that bottoms up position so the bell will be above our fist. The reason for this is we can load single side and we challenge that anti-rotational component whilst maintaining our squat or our lunge pattern. So we're simply going to grab that bell as tight as we can. We're actually going to force onto that bell in that push-up position to make sure we have enough tension through our hand. Now, if you've got a bell with a narrow base, don't go into that push-up position. From here, we're going to hike the bell into that bottoms up position. And we're just going to simply squat down and back up without letting that bell rotate us out of position. And that is going to challenge that anti-rotational component so we maintain that nice upright posture. Loading only to a point where we can maintain the grip and the position of the bottoms up squat. The final little part is working on our overhead. So if you're an overhead athlete and you've got a lot of time, this little sequence will be great bang for your buck for your overhead work to allow to prepare you for your heavy squats and things like that, or cleans, jerks, snatches and things. I'm going to start with a a dumbbell pullover on the bench. We're going to find a position where our thoracic is on the bench, head's relaxed to a point, and we're going to press that dumbbell above our chest. From here, we're lowering our hips and lowering our arms. Maintaining straight arms at all times. And we're going to go through about 10-15 reps here, increasing the range through our thoracic at the time. So now that we've done our pullover, we're going to move to our single kettlebell overhead. The reason why we want to do this is we can isolate either side and work out which side, if there is any asymmetries, that we need to work on. Like I said though, if you haven't done your shoulder portion of the workshop, make sure you work through that individually and isolate any individual shoulder issues you have before you progress to anything overhead. That'll help preserve your shoulders and avoid injury. So from here, we're going to get that bell overhead. We can press it, we can snatch it, we can get it there any way we need to. All right, once we're overhead, we're simply going to get into our squat position, hand out in front or hand where it's comfortable, and squatting down and back up. So maintaining that nice upright position and coming back to the start position there. So using your dumbbell or kettlebell pullover, supersetting that with your overhead kettlebell squat, that'll help prepare you for your overhead work. Lots to take in here, team. Grab the bits or the squats or the lunges or split squats, the exercises that you feel are going to be most beneficial based on what you're finding throughout the journey, apply them to your warm-up and your training, and let me know how you go.